Hello, hello. Welcome to a new episode of Inside.net. I have with me my co-host Corey
What's
Weathers.
up?
Hi,
What's up?
Corey.
Super excited to finally be able to make an episode.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you with us. And then we also have a special guest, Gabriel Emmanuel.
Hi, hi Ellen, hi Corey, nice to meet you all and nice to be here.
Yes, it's so happy to have you on board with us for today. Today's going to be a great conversation. I will say, I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room. It does look a little bit similar to the .NET book study series. But I think it's just awesome. Like we're all just collaborating and seeing what everyone's working on and learning from each other. So this is going to be fun.
This is the power of community, right? When folks come
Exactly.
together, we get to chat and talk about all the fun things we're interested in.
Yes, exactly. So, Gabriel, can you talk about what we're going to be learning today?
I kind of want to talk about something I've been working on for the past few months. So just about 2 to 3 months ago, I dabbled into microservices, the world of microservices, and even though I was scared at first to try it out, but I've been playing around with it, especially using Dapr and gRPC, and it's been fun. So I just want to talk about it in the open. Let's see what happens while we do
Yes,
this.
yes. I'm so excited. This is going to be awesome. So, okay, can we start with kind of explaining what Dapr and gRPC is? So, I guess let's start with gRPC first. What exactly is gRPC?
If you don't mind, I think I would love for us to start with microservices first.
Oh,
Hey,
okay. Yeah, let's do
cool.
it.
yeah, yeah.
Let's
So
do it.
because if we start with microservices, then we probably would understand better the role that gRPC and Dapr has to play um, when working with microservices, right? So from my understanding or the way I would like to explain it is trying to divide your applications into services.
Mhm.
So your applications, instead of having a lot of services in one unit, you have multiple units of services, right? So
All right.
you probably have, like, maybe you're working on an e-commerce application. You probably have a cart service, different from an authentication service, different from an order service, and all of all of these services standing alone. But then they have to communicate with one another, right? Because they are one whole application. But then they are just minute collection of services standing alone and just doing their thing on their own.
So, when it comes to microservices, every service basically has a specific type of job that they perform.
Yes, exactly. And then they're doing it independently. Um, how do I put this now? They're doing it independently and not, they're not really concerned about what other services are doing. So let's say you have a situation where a service is down. I'm going to just dabble into some of the advantages now. So you have a service down. It doesn't affect the
Hmm.
whole application, right? So you probably have the notification service down in an application. Well, that doesn't stop the whole application from running because other persons could still carry out their orders, um, fulfill their cards obligations and all of that, and then you just have an issue with the notification service, which you have to fix. And because the notification service is just a minute service, the issue with fixing it wouldn't even be that much difficult, right? As against having all of these services in one whole application.
Well,
Hmm.
and to that point, I have to imagine that there are some types of applications or some types of designs of applications that lend themselves better to microservices. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, right? So yes, microservices have their advantages, right? But you you don't want to just jump right into building microservices, even though what you're building is I'm not so big, right? So yes, there are advantages and then there are disadvantages, right? So he mentioned, if you're having like 4 different services, that means more work, right? So probably more developers dedicated to one service. So if you have an application that doesn't necessarily need microservices, then I don't see any need why you would be building one.
Let me throw one more follow up at you, which is
Ooh.
what got you down the microservices path? I'm super curious.
Well,
Good question.
my job actually, right? So I did change jobs recently, and while working, I was required to build a microservice because we wanted a situation where, like I mentioned, these services are working independently of one another, right? So we wanted a situation where if something were to break in one service, it doesn't affect the whole service, right? Some other service will still be running, and that's what got me into the world of microservice. Like I mentioned, I was scared at first because
You're like,
because
what's that?
I was already used to building a singleton application, a simple API with all of my services in there. But then you have to think about this service communicating with this service, and then asynchronous communication, synchronous communication, and all of those things. And I was like, wait, what am I going to do about
Yeah.
this? But then
Absolutely.
continuous practice, and I'm not there yet. I'm still learning, still growing, but yeah, I would say that I've been enjoying my role in building that microservice application.
So, okay, I have a question, and I don't know if
But
you've already touched on this yet, but what is your favorite part about building microservices?
I think the services communicating with one another would be my favorite part, right? So
The
you
communication.
yeah you're doing something on this service, and this other service is actually getting information from okay, let me put it this way. You have an other service, and then you have a cat service, right? So you're doing something on the other service, but then the cat service is reacting to that. So there's like an event that's making the cat service react to it. That would be one of my highest points of building microservices. Just seeing that happen, wow, that's really really cool.
One,
Yeah,
and
that's
I know
awesome.
Like,
that
sorry about that. It's just like allowing my service speak,
The
speak to another.
happiness.
well, that's what I was gonna say. Like I know that like way back in the day, it was so hard to get like processes to talk to one another, and now we have technologies like Dapr that just make this such a delightful experience. So I
and
love to see your excitement.
yes, and so easy, I must say, because I was scared at first, but then the process is really quite easy, especially with Dapr, right? The way Dapr works and the way it's built makes it so easy that with just a single method, you're doing what you want to do. You're publishing a message, and just a single line, you're subscribing to that message and using that the data gotten from that message to do whatever you want to do. That's just really beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We actually have Cecil in the chat. He says, let's see if we can get it. Don't be scared, my friend. It's funny
Yeah,
because he actually is going to give a talk on microservices later this month. So that's just super exciting to see, like this excitement, this general excitement about microservices.
yeah, that's I'd really love to listen to that talk. I think when I picked up Dapper, one of the courses I took was one from Cecil, where it was talking about how to install Dapper in your application, how to Dapperize your application, and all of
Oh,
that, right?
wow.
So yeah, that course helped a bit, even though some of the codes were really top level, but then the course did help a bit.
That's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so
Yeah.
what do you want to share your screen, or how are you feeling?
All right. Yeah, so I could do that, right? I'm gonna share my
Let me
screen.
know.
Well, and while you're doing that, there's another thought that's gone through the back of my mind, which is gRPC. Now, I'm someone who comes from like the way old school of .NET, and so I hear gRPC and I'm like, wait, what? I'm super curious to see how we'll connect these dots with taking an application that already exists, and now you've sort of made it into smaller services. But now you've got the Dapr piece, which will come in, but also using gRPC behind the scenes.
Exactly, right. So when I was building the services I was going to use as a demo for this talk, I was also having that difficulty, right? How would gRPC come in? What would I do? It took me a minute, right? But I guess we'll see what I did, and probably what I did is not conventional. It's not the nice way to do it, but then I guess we'll see
I'm
if
sure
it
it's
would
awesome.
work. And and a point of note, I haven't actually tested this, so I'll be testing it on the call. Hopefully,
Do it live.
Brilliant.
all right. So I'm just going to give an overview of what was done.
Okay.
While thinking of what to build, I thought, okay, since I've been talking about e-commerce and stuff like that, I'm not building a full-blown e-commerce application. It's just something simple. So what I had in mind was, if you create a product, you probably get a reward, which should probably be a cashback, something of like 2.7% of the amount of product you get, something like that. And then once that happens, a notification is sent to you to let you know, oh, you've gotten a reward for that product you got and stuff like that. And then I also added a UI to get to see the rewards in the database. Another advantage to using microservices is that these services can have their own databases. So to highlight that, I made the products. So I like that I made a product service, use MongoDB, and then I also made the reward service use SQLite DB.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and then notification service, nothing was done on that point. Just receive a message and then just log to the console, right? Um, and then the UI. This part gave me a whole lot of issues. I wanted to use
Aw.
Blazor. But I couldn't Dapperize the Blazor app. I don't know why. I'm going to look into it later on. I haven't done that before, so I'm going to look into it later on. So I then decided to use MVC.
Okay.
All right, so let's start with our product service. What did I do with the product service? Like I mentioned, we have an endpoint that you would use in. Let me bring this out a bit. So you have an endpoint that you'd use to create your products, and then when that happens, it just saves to the database. But in the models, what I did was I made sure I added an enum that switches between processing and process, right? So if the rewards for that product haven't been processed, it's on processing, and then when it's processed, it moves back to process. So I added that switch on the product entity. And what happens next is where I had the issue, right? So I wanted to know how it was coming, but I didn't get it at first. But I figured, okay, what if I created a background task that would be looking at the database every probably 10 seconds and then get all products that has a status of processing, then forward those after calculating the rewards, forward that to the reward service. And that's what I did here. So in the background task folder, I created a backgrounds task service that's inheriting from background service. And right here inside of the executor sync, you would notice that I'm getting the required service, which is the repository that was created here. And inside of the repository, I have this get all processing rewards products. I don't know what that name is. But we're just going to manage with that. So okay, I wanted to just show what's inside of there. So I'm just going to go to implementation. Inside of this, okay, just close this for a second. I'm just going here. All right, so get all processing rewards service. I'm getting all of the products, the status of processing, and I'll come back here. Then, okay, yeah, so something is missing here, right? I need to I need to call this product service, right? So I need to add that. Give me a second to do that. Let me see.
So Gabriel, in the meantime, and I this may sound like a dumb question, but I don't care. So where does the gRPC come into play, and when does Dapr come into play? And could we also talk about like what that is and what those two different things mean?
Not a dumb question, by the way.
Exactly.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
can't talk about that. So we're going to be talking about that now.
Okay.
That's why I did let me, what do I call this now? I'm just gonna call it let's call it products scope, and then I'm gonna use this to get use it to get the I product service. And then I would just the way the scope gets. Okay, just bring in this guy. Give me a second. We're almost done with this.
Yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, we're picking up an instance of the product service, and yet another instance of the product repo, so that we can do some stuff with the products that we get back. That's what I can see.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. So
Connecting the dots.
The product service houses the product service houses the gRPC, what the gRPC is doing. So I'm getting all of those products and then I'm sending it into the product service where gRPC would send that to the reward service.
Got it. So instead of using what we would traditionally call as a REST API, where you would make an HTTP call, instead we're using gRPC behind the scenes to do this.
Exactly. So I'm going to get I product service. What we have there. Give me a second. All right. So normally this is the service I'm trying to call, and I need to pass this to the interface so that I can call the service. And this is going to be an interface. All right. So now I should be able to call the service. It's going to be what's the name of the service? Some process reward transactions. I'm gonna call that here, and then I'm gonna pass in products.
So that's the list of products we got earlier that were needing to be processed. We've now created the product service, and we're going to say, hey, go process all of these products. And behind the scenes, that's going to do some fun stuff, it looks like.
Exactly. So that's what is happening. So we got the products here, and then we're passing it into this process reward transaction where inside of it we're using gRPC. We're using gRPC to send it out to the client, because okay, so before we even jump right in, we're missing a couple of steps. To use gRPC, you need to have a protobuf file. I'm not sure if we've heard of that, but this is what it looks like. So need to create a protobuf file where we have our service and then our RPC. And gRPC stands for something remote procedure call, right? I don't know what the G stands for, but RPC means remote procedure call, right? So like
Remote
the
processing call.
procedure.
Remote procedure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like this service is talking to another service remotely, and we have to create this protobuf file. And if you look at it, what we're saying here is we have this method that accepts this request and returns this reply. And if you look at the message here, the request, so it's more like what you're doing with your APIs, but just with a little bit of difference in the syntax, right? So with the message for the request, it shows that the request should have like a product ID, an email, a reward amount, and then the transaction time. And you should also pass these numbers to show their position in the message. I would like to call them probably your class. Yeah, I like to call them because they act like a class, a standard plain old C# class, right? And then the reply, if you look at that, says what you're getting from the reply, you're getting a product ID and a response message. So once you do this, you should also add in the CS proj that proto file in an item group and then specify what kind of code it should generate for you. Because what happens with your proto file is it generates a bunch of codes for you. If you're specifying that you want the client's code, it generates the client's codes for you. If you're specifying that you want the server code, this could also be server. So if you want the server code, it generates the server code for you, and then all of those stuff are abstracted somewhere, but they're just generated and then you use them. But in this case, I'm going to be using the client because the server is on the reward service. All right, so after generating those codes, you can now use that, especially for the clients, you can now use that in here. What I'm doing here is just creating a method with a retry policy that says, okay, what happens when this doesn't send? You probably want to retry for a number of times and all of that. Then and then another thing is gRPC runs on something called HTTP2, right? Not just HTTP. So it runs on something called HTTP2, which I guess is an added advantage because from what I've gathered, it allows for multiple connections to happen at once over the calls, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
then,
Yeah.
So let me make sure I understand that. And I'm just making sure. So if you've got an application that's talking to a backend server and that application is using gRPC, you like without using gRPC, you can send a single request and you get a single response back because that's how TCP/IP works. With gRPC, you can send multiple requests at the same time.
yes,
because
exactly.
it's using HTTP2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
especially if you're using gRPC streaming, so there's a process called gRPC streaming. So I think there are about 4 of those processes. When you're using gRPC, there is the unary one where you send one message and get one response, which is what we're working with right now. But then there is also the client streaming where you're sending multiple messages and then the server is returning just one response. And then there is the server streaming where you're sending one message and getting multiple responses. I'm not sure I know the use case for that. But then there is also the what's it called? I've forgotten the name. But then it's like both sides streaming to each other. So you're sending multiple messages and then receiving multiple responses at the same time, which is what you're trying to explain right now, I think. Right. So, but right now what we're with is the unary process where you're sending one message and getting one response back.
The visual that I'm like, as you were explaining that, the visual that I have for something like that it's just more so like a freeway.
Right.
Like when it comes to gRPC, it's like just multiple like
Yeah.
vehicles or requests and responses like coming in and out, passing each other. That's what it sounds like to me. It just speeds up the process.
Exactly. So especially like I mentioned, especially if you're using streaming, it's really, really fast, right? Just streams messages across and then gets the response back. It's really, really fast. But then
Oh
that's
wow.
not what we're talking about right now. We're just using the
Yeah.
unary, which is not really complex. But go ahead, Corey.
No, I
You
was
want to
only
say
going to
something?
say that one of the things that's fascinating about this is, and I keep going here because this is like one of the basics of the internet, right? Like most of the internet functions over TCP/IP, and so it is truly that you can only do one request and response at a time. Even though there's things that are happening behind the scenes that are queuing up requests, you still have to
Yeah.
wait to get that response back in order.
Going back again.
This breaks that paradigm significantly, which
Oh
is
wow.
interesting.
I'm just writing
All right.
stuff down.
When I just saw a question too from Jeff Fritz there. Hi, Jeff. Jeff says, what hosting config would you recommend to get the most performance out of gRPC with HTTP2?
Okay, to be honest, I'm not sure I understand that question and would be able to give an answer to that question.
And that's cool.
I love that honesty.
Exactly.
This is my first time of even like hearing about gRPC and Dapr, so I love it. This is fun.
Jeff, this sounds like a good question we'll take to come back for our next episode. So there will be a part 2, it sounds like. Gabriel, we've just signed you up for part 2.
You're on. Brilliant.
All right. That'll be interesting. Okay, so where did I stop? All right, so after I stopped somewhere. Yeah. So after doing that, we need to get the address which I am passing via configuration. So the address should be somewhere in my app settings. I'm just going to ignore that. But what I'm supposed to be putting there is the address of the server, right? So once I start up my reward service, localhost port, whatever is what I'm going to be putting there in my app settings. Then I'm going to create a channel and then pass the address through that channel and also pass the configs into that channel. Then next we have this and this, which was part of the code that was created for us. So let's just quickly peep into it. I'm going to the implementation and we have all of this that was created for us. And
wow.
Just from nowhere, just come into the application. Once you build the application, it's just created for us, and that's one of the advantages, right? You have this very neat, not really neat, I don't know, but just complex and a lot of codes written for you that you can do whatever you want to do with it, right? So you just knew of that class. So reward transaction is coming from our putable file, which is this, and then since it's a client, we're just using the client's rewards transactions client and then passing our channel into it. Right now, we can use the clients to process the transaction and then send our request, which was the request that we also specified here, reward transactions request. And
there's something interesting here I want to call out too.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to that protobuf file?
All right.
I know you were saying that there's a bunch of code that gets created for us, and I was looking at line 17 where it said google.protobuf.timestamp, and I was super curious as to because .NET comes with its own version of a timestamp. I was super curious as to how that translation happens. I have to imagine that the code that gets created for us does the conversion such that all the values set correctly. This is interesting to me.
So yes, like you mentioned, the code that was generated should do that, but then we also have this methods that helps with that, right? So we have this timestamp dot from this time. So you're passing the date time, and then this also helps with the conversion to the data type, right? And that's one thing I also noticed, because I kind of was thinking about it. I wanted to send decimals. So the data type for this is quite different from the normal C# data types, where you have ints and longs and all of that. Some of them are, they look alike and they're the same, but then some of them are either different or non-existent, right? So if you probably want to use a long, you want to probably change this to int 64, and that would work, right? So you don't want to put a long in there. But then I was actually looking for how to do that with a decimal, and I think you need to tweak this a bit and play around with it to be able to achieve that. But I didn't have time to do all of that, so I just settled for an integer. All right. So once you send that request, a response is given, and then you can do whatever you want to do with the response. And that's just everything that we needed to do for our gRPC client aspect of this application. But then when we go to the reward service, that's another thing. The protobuf file that you create for your client service can just be lifted and then put in your rewards in your server part of the application, right? So you do not need to change anything, although I'm going to be changing this because I changed that in the previous file. So this is going to be 3, and then this is going to be 4. All right. Okay, so you don't need to change anything. The only difference would be in your CS approach, where you're specifying that in this case, what you want built for you is the server code, right? For the client's part of it, you just select this client, and then for the server part of it, you select the server, right? But then what happens if you want both codes to be generated for you? All you need to do is just switch to both, right? Wow. And then it generates both code for you, right? But
that's convenient.
I'm going to leave this at server. Then the next thing I want to do is just look into the services class, where we have okay, so in this case, what we're doing is, remember, in our clients part of it, what we created was a new instance of reward transactions that's reward transaction clients, right? But for the server, what you're doing is you're inheriting from reward transactions dot reward transactions base. So you're inheriting from the base of whatever service you created right in here, right? So whatever service you're inheriting from the base of that service. Then you can go ahead to create that service, and you're passing in the request, right? Because that's what is being sent from the client, and then you're also passing in this context file, which I'm not sure what it does there, but then that's
hey.
So, then yeah. So once you get the request, you what I did was persisting to the database, because in the product side I already did the calculation, right? So I already created. What happened here? Not sure what happened here. Okay, product is not
null.
From this to.
You need a question mark somewhere?
No, I think I'm pretty sure it's because of one of them is a list and the other one is an enumerable. So I'm going to just switch what I'm passing into here to an enumerable, and that should work. And let's confirm that that's working.
And while you troubleshoot this, there's a comment that came up in chat. Welcome, Badger23. Badger23 said, in Visual Studio 2022, you can also right-click on Connected Services and add a gRPC reference there. So the same stuff that we just walked through, where we moved the protocol file over to the server application, and then we had the necessary references generated for us. Visual Studio 2022 gives us a way to do it through the GUI, which is really nice. Shout out to the IDE.
Okay, so adding a cast to it, however, that wouldn't be the best practice. Just for time's sake, I'm just going to leave that cast there. There was a reason why I came back here, trying to figure that out. I can't remember. And let's just go back to reward service.
I will say you were previously in CS Proj, if that helps you kind of backtrack.
I remember now. What I wanted to show that I created this get reward amount where I just calculated just a simple calculation of the amounts and 2.7% of it to just get the amount for the reward that will be given to whatever customer came in to create or to get the product, right? So what I just need to do here is persist to the database, and also this is where our next service comes in, Dapr, right? So gRPC was able to send the request to the reward service, and then the reward service was able to get it, and the reward service is doing some stuff with it, saving to the database, and also publishing to the notifications topic or to the notification service, right? So that is what we're doing, right? We're receiving, saving to the database, and now using Dapr to do a sort of publish, subscribe, events stuff, and then sending a message to our notification service using Dapr. And remember when we mentioned that just with one line of code, we could do whatever we want to do with Dapr. So right now, just with, I'm going to zoom this out a bit. Okay. So just with this line of code on line 42, I don't know, that looks very small. On line 42, that's using this publish event is sync, and then passing our pub sub message, the topic, and also what we're sending to the publish subscribe topic, right? And we're going to come back to notification service where we're subscribing to that event. But let's briefly talk about Dapr. Dapr is a very interesting solution. Let me put it down. Very interesting solution, because just with Dapr you could do almost about anything with your microservices. You could do service invocation, that's what you do with HTTP calls or REST APIs and stuff like that. You could do that with Dapr, and you could do publish and subscribe. You could do state management and a whole lot of stuff. I've only been able to work with pub subs and service invocation, right? I've not really done much around state management and the rest of the building blocks that Dapr provides for us. But what's interesting about Dapr is you don't need to know that those other services exist. Dapr does that for you. Dapr, if you're Daprizing your application, Dapr just creates like a Dapr sidecar that connects with your application, and then other services also have the sidecars, and that's how they communicate, right? So you're sending something to the Dapr sidecar, that sidecar also communicates with the sidecar of a different application, and then just sends that information back to the service. That's a whole lot, right? For someone who's just working with Dapr for like let's say 2-3 months. But then when I see that work, I'm like intrigued. I'm like, what is happening here? Just with one line of code, I am sending. If you're trying to work with Kafka or RabbitMQ for event sourcing and stuff, you have to write a whole lot of code. You have to create the connection. You have to make sure you're doing those connections right, and then most of the time you end up having issues, right? But then with Dapr, just by doing this, you're good, right? Well, not just by doing that, but you also have to install Dapr on your system, and I believe if you go to dapr.io, you'll be able to see the process for installing Dapr on your system. You need Docker. You could also use the Kubernetes, right? But I don't use Kubernetes because of my PC. It's going to be a whole lot for my PC, but I use Docker. So once you install Dapr, it just installs some stuff, and then also installs some components for you. Redis is installed for state management and also for PubSub. Actually, I actually didn't know you could use Redis for PubSub until I worked with Dapr, right? So, but then I switched to Kafka after a while, right? So, then for working with Kafka, I had to just create a Kafka Docker stuff on my Docker, and also change the Redis components on my PC to a Kafka component, and then that just did the magic. All of that I wouldn't be able to show, right? But if you go to the Dapr documentation, you should see how to do all of that, right?
And I'll just throw one thing in here, which I think is really interesting, because I want to bring this back in the context of microservices, right? Which is like, if you have one application that is composed of many services, and you take these services and you deploy them into a production environment that looks like a containerized environment, whether it's orchestrated with Kubernetes or you do it yourself, you legitimately have a scenario where Dapr takes care of making sure that it knows which service is alive and which service has gone to sleep and which instance may be healthy and which one may not be, so we don't route requests there. It sounds like Dapr takes care of all of that for you, which is genius, by the way.
Exactly, right? So when you have your services in different pods, Dapr already is also created in those pods. And even when you're increasing those instances, Dapr is also increasing along with your services. So once that is happening, it knows what is alive, what is LD, and what is available for calls to be made to. And all of that is just done by Dapr, and all you need to do is just Dapprize the application and use those existing building blocks, right? They're called building blocks, existing building blocks, and you're good to go.
Nice.
So the way I'm understanding it after hearing that information as well is that, so basically gRPC is what helps connect these services, these microservices, and it's what helps pass information between these services. And then Dapr is what monitors those services. Do I have the right idea?
Close.
Okay.
Close.
What am I missing?
Close.
What am I missing?
So Dapr doesn't just monitor. Dapr does
Okay.
a whole lot more,
Okay.
right? Dapr also communicates between services and all of that. So the fact about Dapr monitoring and having some of those data about what is alive and what is not alive, what is LD and what is not LD is just a huge plus to the process of communications between microservices.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the way I describe gRPC in this is, I'll go back to your analogy around highways, which is, if you've got one highway that's got toll roads on it and it's got all these additional exits, that's like the HTTP REST way to do this. Versus if you just got like an open highway where things can go back and forth, it's almost like the express road. That's gRPC. And then what Dapr does is it says, okay, well, I know about how many other express roads there are, and I know where these express roads go. And so if you give me this request and it needs to go to a specific destination, I'll put it on a specific express road for you.
Almost like a map.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's like zoomed out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I'm getting it.
Okay, so we stopped here. So after sending the message, what happens is we just send a reply, which is just the response message and then the product ID back to the product's gRPC clients, right? And then what happens, what we need to do to Dapprize this application, I'm going to the program.cs. All you need to do is add this to the DI container, right? Builder the services that add Dapr clients, and you're good to go. You also need to add app.use cloud events, and yeah, that should be it, right? Since you're not consuming a message, if you were consuming a message, which is what we're going to check in the notifications, you should also add map subscribe handler, which we'll look at shortly. But for this application, all we needed to do is add this, add Dapr client, and also use cloud events, and then this application is Dapperized. Every other thing is done for us. We do not need to set any other stuff, and we're good to go.
A quick question. I'm assuming Dapr's only got one NuGet package too, yeah?
Yeah. Yes, you need this dapr.asp.NET Core,
Got it.
Oh,
which I
wow.
think if you go inside of it should have some other things inside. Yeah, should have the Dapr clients, the pipeline and stuff like that. Let me bring
Nice.
this up. It's yeah, so you should have some other stuff inside of it. But then just that NuGet package and you're set.
Nice.
All right. So now we're going to our notification service where we are consuming, and this is the part that's even more interesting, right? So you the method I'm using to consume is more like you're creating an endpoint, right? So that method works as a consumer and also as an endpoint, which means that you could also hit that endpoint by just calling it through an API or something like that. But then you could also hit it from the pub sub message that was sent by the publisher, right? So this is the endpoints. All I did was decorate this with this topic attributes and send in the pub sub name and the topic name. So this is the pub sub name, which is the same as what we sent from the reward. So if I go to reward service here, I passed in the pub sub name, which is inside .NET pub sub, and then the topic name, which is inside dash .NET dash notifications. And then I'm also going to use that same thing to subscribe on the subscriber part of it, right? And then I'm also receiving this exact class or data that was sent from the publisher, right? So I sent this published notifications DTO from the publisher, and I'm receiving that exact stuff, right? So if I come down here, you see an instance of public notifications DTO which sends the email and the reward amount, and then once that is received, I'm just logging to the console, sending product reward notifications to email, and reward is this, and I'm just sending that to. So I'm just assuming that there is a notification service that would handle sending out of notifications, which I didn't build for the sake of this demo. So just using the log information to log that to the console. Now, this is just one part of Dapr. The other part of Dapr was the part that was giving me some issues, but then I decided to work with MVC. So I was trying to do that with a Blazor application, but that didn't work out. I couldn't Daprize the application, so I just used an MVC application, and I did that. So this is service invocation, right? So when you're trying to call an API, probably using REST clients or HTTP clients, you have to create that HTTP client. You have to do some other stuff. But then with Dapr, you just need to mention what you're expecting and the method, the name of the service, and then the endpoints. And it goes out to look for this service. Once it finds the service, it looks for this endpoint, gets the response, and then returns that to you. And that's just what happens with this part of Dapr.
One question here. What happens if Dapr fails?
What happens if Dapr fails? All right, so while working with Dapr, what I do if I am worried about Dapr failing, is I just wrap it around a try catch block, and then if it fails, I just probably log to the console an error or a warning. That's if it's something that I don't really need to use, I just log a warning. But if it's something that I need that response for something else, then I just throw an error, and it just breaks the code and something like that happens, right? So it depends on what you're expecting, right? So if the response you're expecting is really necessary to the process, right, you probably want to try an error to just stop the whole process, right? But if the response is not really important, right, you probably just want to catch it and then continue the process.
Yeah, and I have to imagine our friend Cecil, who will probably, if he's not watching, watch this later, will come back and say, "Well, of course, try catch makes sense. Yes, this is what we do." But Dapr never fails. This is what he would say. Exactly what he would say.
It cannot fail.
That's exactly what he would say.
Well, yeah, that's true, right? So if your application is running, Dapr wouldn't fail, right? So one of the reasons why Dapr would fail for me is probably if the application is not yet started, or something about the database and stuff like that. But Dapr itself, I haven't actually seen that happen.
Wow.
All right. So I didn't do anything around state management, but this is just about everything that I was able to come up with. Let's test it out. So before doing that, I have already created, like, started Dapr on my Docker. We have Dapr Zipkin placements on Redis, and then I also have my Kafka running. Right. So just going to take that out. And normally, some would like to orchestrate this with Kubernetes or just work with Docker Compose, but most times I just work with my console. So to help me, I just create a file where I put in the commands and just work with them, because the commands to start it up sometimes are really long. So I'm going to start with the products, right? So let me start with the products. And I also have my console coming up here. I'm just going to show that. Let me reduce this for a bit. Give me a second.
And I'm also laughing at Cecil because he did exactly what I expected. Pop right into the comments. Dapr never fails. I told you. You had to know it was coming.
That is hilarious.
So reduce this. Wow, this is long. Okay, just reduce it a bit and bring it up here. Oh no. Come back here. Come back here. I have to bring it up.
We've all been there.
Like, what are you doing? Don't be like that.
Come on. I want to. Okay, let's see. What's happening? Oh my god. I'm sorry about this.
No,
Just
no worries.
Okay, now, yeah, I'm just going to reduce this. If I work with this terminal, it helps me function when I'm working with Dapr, because we have so many services which you have to start. So I would want to start products. I'm going to get the commands. Right, so remember when I mentioned for servicification that you have to put in the name of the service, right? So you might want to wonder, how do we set the name of the service, right? Because for servicification, the name of the service is what it uses to look for that service. How do we set the service? Then what you need to do is, once starting it, you have to set the app ID for that service, right?
Oh.
So I'm going to bring products. So I'll paste that and we see what's happening. So we have the command. We have Dapr run. Why is this happening? Just my system is freezing up. Okay, so we have Dapr run. Then you have to set the app ID. And if you notice, I'm saying inside .NET products service. Then
Nice.
you have to set the ports. which is 7064. Then you also have to specify, because I'm using SSL, so I have to specify that I'm using SSL and then .NET run. So the port I got from checking out my properties. So I went to the launch and I got a port from here, right? So this port, and that's what I used. All right, so I'm going to click enter for that to start. Then the next thing I want to do is reward service should get. I need a reward service. I also want to get the same thing. So it's just the same process. Dapr run app ID gets the set a name for the application, then select the port. If you're using SSL, you select that you're using SSL. If not, you just remove that and then put in .NET run at the end. So rewards, I'm going to put that in there and click enter to start. Then the next I'm going to get that for notifications. Get the commands. Let's copy that and notifications. So I think my system is doing a whole lot and it's really telling on it. So just forgive me for that.
And you're streaming too.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And the streaming as well.
And running
So
Docker, like
running Docker, running Dapr, running Kafka,
yes.
streaming, Visual Studio Code, the whole lot is happening.
Yep.
All right, so finally, I'll just get that for the UI and put that in. So just allow all of them start together. So while we're waiting for that to happen, because it might take a minute for that to happen, we could just continue discussing about some other stuff in case you have any questions or comments about what we've talked on so far.
Yeah, so my question is going back to even getting these packages, is it like a NuGet package? You just go on like your, is it the marketplace?
Yeah, you just go on Nuggets and you just go on Nuggets and you get the package. The same thing with gRPC actually, right? So you just go on Nuggets, you get gRPC dots. I think you could get one package for gRPC as well. However, I work with three, and I've just been used to working with three protocol client factory, and two for the clients. And for the server, you just use gRPC.ASP.NET Core, right? So that's what you need. Then for Dapr, you just work with Dapr.ASP.NET Core, and then you have what you need.
Okay. And then I'm trying to figure out how I want to ask this. So how do you even start a new project like this where you have like multiple services and then you have something like the Dapr command.ps, like all of these new, because it's new to me. Like I've never seen this stuff before. So like
It was actually
what
personally added by me. I just
what
personally
was
added
that?
this because it helps. I said Dapr command.ps is a file that I just personally added to help
Okay.
store the startup command, right? So I don't have to think about it when I'm typing it out, right? I just store them there, and then when I want to test my application, I just get it from there and start testing my application.
Got it. And then your file with the .proto, is that something similar as well, or is that like a different type of file that I've just never heard of?
That's a protocol file for gRPC, which is actually necessary for building gRPC. So there is an issue with this trying to start up Dapr, but for some reason saying the processor is exited, and that's probably has something to do with my Docker. I'm going to check that out. Let me see. I think Docker is running. Everything seems to go fine.
While you do that, I will call out, and this is interesting, sort of to your point there, Lon. We've got So just listing it out, you've got C Sharp and ASP.NET Core. We've got gRPC, which is always available as an option for how you want your services to be able to communicate, right? Um, then you've got Dapr, which is sort of doing which makes it easy for you to send something to Dapr, let Dapr do the talking out to other services. Each of these services has their own sort of storage. It's really easy to see how like an application would start super simple. Hey, I just want to build like a basic API, turns into like a multiple sort of technology based solution.
Yeah.
It's super easy to see it.
Lots of layers.
Yeah. And let's not forget, there's an MVC application which is meant to, show off these things. Like it can get overwhelming for someone who is just learning any one of these.
Yes.
So I'd be curious to hear to that question, Gabriel, if there's like any suggestions for how folks should get started. Should they maybe start with a specific website, or maybe start with a specific approach? Maybe they design out how they want things to talk. What would you say to that?
That's a great
question. It's really difficult to figure out if you want to go the microservice route when building your application. I must say, right? It took me a whole lot of thinking to even decide what to build for this demo, right? But I think if you if you have an application where you want different services to stand alone without breaking each other, then you should build that as a microservice, right? And then how do you start? You start with one service. You just start with one.
Keep it simple.
Just start with one service and then take it up from there, right? So you probably want to start with the first service, right? So you're thinking, what's this first service I might need, right? If you need an authentication service, then that's probably the first service. You build that service, and then what happens next? When someone is authenticated, you probably want to send their ID, their authentication ID or something to somewhere else. Then you work on that service and just keep going in from there.
Yeah, and I love this. And as someone who, admittedly, I come from the world of security, given my current job at Okta. I'm always in the back of my mind thinking about how we secure these things. We don't need to talk about it now. We'll add that for part 2 as well to Jeff's question and sign you up for more episodes, Gabriel.
It'd be fun.
I'd love to come back. Sadly, I don't know what is happening. It's refusing to start, probably because of my Kafka. I'm not sure. I think if I were to restart Docker, it would take a lot of time to do that.
Yeah. Cecil says in the chat that Visual Studio doesn't like to behave when you're streaming.
Yeah. So probably when I come next, that's what we'll do first. Test this out and see how it works. Because that's the beauty of microservices. You want to see how all of the services communicate with each other. But sadly, I can't test it out right now.
And that's okay. We've already learned, at least for me, I've already learned so much today. So this has been a really great introduction for me into gRPC and Dapr, and even microservices in general.
Yeah, I've absolutely enjoyed watching how you've had to navigate this yourself as you've been learning the technologies and building something that's actually in use in the real world. So thank you for sharing this journey with us, because that's the part of development that a lot of people don't often see, right? Mm-hmm. They're often at their own monitors and they're learning on their own, but to see that you've had to do this because of things that are going on out at your work is really, really, really cool.
Yeah,
super awesome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm sad we couldn't test this out. Probably next time we'll test it out.
Yes. And also, before we even close out, Gabriel, please share your exciting news. I want everybody to know the exciting news.
Yeah. So I was nominated for a board seat at dotNET Foundation. The elections are going on right now, and they should round up on the 6th of October. Yeah. So if you're member or a voting member, you should look at the contestants. I don't want to call them contestants, the participants or people who are running. So you should look at them and then
Campaigners.
just the campaigners or whatever. So you should make a choice out of this. Well, I'm really excited to be part of the community. The moment I heard about the community, I jumped right in because I love community engagement. I love talking about what I'm doing, trying to build people up, and also
Yes.
reaching out to others, right? So I jumped right in. So you also should just try out. There are a lot of communities that need our efforts to make sure that we are well preaching the gospel of .NET.
I love that. Hey,
Yes.
did I hear you say that voting closes on the 6th? We have 3 days
Yeah.
to vote?
Yeah. Voting closes on the 6th, so the announcements would be going live on the 7th of October.
Exciting. Yeah, I have it on my to-do list after we close out today. I had a vote.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And where can people find you?
Yeah, you could find me on Twitter. My handle is _CODEASE, as in C for cat, O for orange, D for dog, E for elephant, A for apple, S for snake, and E for elephant again.
Awesome. Yes. And then as well as you, Corey, where can people find you?
I'm always really easy to find on all things Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn. My handle's Corey L. Weathers. That's Corey with an E, L, weather like the outside temperature with an S.
Awesome. And then for me, you can find me at elandinacodes.com. I'm also on Twitter, but my website just has all that information, Instagram, everything, GitHub. So yeah. But thank you again, Gabriel, for hanging out with us and teaching us. This was awesome. And thank you all for watching. You all have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.